Recording. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the October 30th meeting of the Town Subcommittee of the Expenditure, Revenue, and School Committee. I'd like to move on to our agenda, which I'm pulling up again right now, which okay. To approve the minutes from 10/24. I'm assuming everyone had a chance to take a look. They were posted in time.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I was going to say that people put, again, you guys have more experience than I, like what time the meeting started, what time the meeting ended, but I didn't notice that in there. But other than that, it was quite an excellent summary, in my opinion.
Thank you. I didn't because I didn't note them because I wasn't. And
No
I
problem.
could do it now.
Yeah, it was something like 9:05 to 10:15 or something. I mean, you could look at the recording, but I mean, it's.
Oh, today is 9 a.m. I've
Well,
noted
today
it.
was, yeah, okay.
Okay.
Yeah, no problem. Any other discussion?
No, I think that's good for people to know the length of time. Good.
Thanks.
Jesse, I just had a quick question for Janet, if you don't mind.
Yep.
Please.
Just for the benefit of those of us who might be, takers of minutes in the future, did you make use of the AI generated transcript and or summation, and did you find it good?
So I found it helpful. I did cut and paste from some of it. I corrected it. I decided that I've never heard Chaz call himself anything other than Chaz, so I changed Charles to Chaz. I found that the recap and that part of it before it got into was totally false with all of these next steps that we didn't make, but it's helpful as a guide for me to understand what did I scribble.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, John, the week before I used it to help me write the minutes for the first meeting. And I sort of had a similar experience. Some of the summaries were a little bit overly simplified or wrong, but in general, it picked up on the themes of that, the threads of all the discussions.
Yeah. Good.
So it was worth it. It certainly didn't send us in like the wrong direction.
Good.
All right, any other discussion about the minutes? If not, we'll take a vote to approve the minutes as they are. Janet, how do you vote?
Aye.
Ruth Ellen,
Yes.
John?
Abstain. I wasn't at the meeting, sorry.
Okay.
John was an
I-
A too.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
apologize. I apologize for putting you on the spot like that. And I vote aye as well. So the minutes pass. Thank you. And thank you, Janet, for that. Our next item is and I can't seem to keep the agenda in front of me, but I'll figure it out.
Oh, it's a discussion of pay.
Yeah, pay class and comparable communities. I believe that would be Chaz.
Yes, thank you, and good morning to everyone. So we are still in the process, but are getting close to compiling the underlying data for pay and class comparisons, both in terms of our union employees and non-union employees. I wanted to correct something from the last meeting when we talked about the pay and class study for the technical and mid-management plan. Charlie Young, who spearheaded the analysis of comparable communities on that, and I had a discussion, and Charlie refreshed my recollection on how that process went, which was really, he did. So let me take another step back. Prior to doing this, and prior to my arrival here in Brookline, the town had commissioned a study from the Collins Center, which is a nonprofit, a UMass affiliated nonprofit organization that provides support to municipal bodies. And we had asked the Collins Center to do a pay and class comparison of our non-union positions. And we were not satisfied with the end product of that process. The Collins Center, we felt, chose inappropriate or incomplete comparators and didn't really do the deep dive that we felt was necessary in order to really figure out what the difference was between our technical and mid-management staff positions and positions in comparable communities. So when Charlie arrived, which was right after I did, I think this is actually, if it's not today, it's at some point in this month, was Charlie's 3rd-year anniversary with us. He took it upon himself to do basically a better version of that analysis. He built out a more comprehensive list of comparators. He looked for comprehensive comparable job titles in those communities and tried to analyze wherever possible the differences between those positions and how they lined up with ours. And then we took that data, which was, not an apples to apples comparison, which is what I said last week, but was still just to compare, if not titles, then relative positions within departments and divisions. Who's in charge of this, who's in charge of that, who is the second in line. And then the HR team, Anne and Leslia and Jennifer Stallion, worked together to kind of do the more intricate analysis of what the job roles and responsibilities were. So we identified positions that were extreme outliers where, is someone getting paid 20% or more below a comparable title in other communities? And if so, what are we missing there? So we did that deep dive on those positions just to make sure that we were correct, that yes, we are underpaying in response to the same for the same work, the same amount of work, or the same responsibilities that those positions undertook. And then once we had that information, we tried to move to get within 5% of our comparable basket of communities for all of those positions that were significantly, that were significantly beyond where significantly beyond the comparable basket. And so that process took about 2 years, a little over 2 years. We moved through the entire technical and mid-management pay scale, and we also moved through the department head pay scale. The department head analysis was conducted in a slightly different manner. The department head analysis really was about the complexity of the work being assigned to the department heads, the growth of their responsibilities over time, pay equity in particular. We were concerned about positions that had traditionally been occupied by women, or not being paid equally to positions traditionally occupied by men. So we focused on all of those issues and ensured that the department heads as well were being paid, not necessarily in comparison to other communities, but in comparison to the difficulty and complexity of the work that we asked them to do. So last override allocated $500,000 in operating expenses for this purpose, to bring the technical and mid-management plan into alignment with the other communities, as well as bringing the department heads up to a level commensurate with their roles and responsibilities. So around $100,000 was spent on the department head pay, and $400,000 was spent on the technical and mid-management side of this. I will add that the department heads do include the division heads for the Department of Public Works. Since the Public Works Department is our largest department, the division heads of the Department of Public Works are effectively managing something at the scale of a departmental level. The head of Highway and Sanitation, for example, is Kevin Johnson, and he manages a staff that's, as big as some of the other entire departments. So we
The 100 and the 400, the 100 and the 400, Chaz, that you mentioned, those are actual dollars that have been allocated to be spent. Is that what that means?
Yes, that is correct. And since then, those dollars have been distributed, or that money has been allocated to the salaries that were out of proportion. The biggest gap there, and the one that we dealt with initially, was for social workers. The social workers at the Council on Aging were not being paid commensurate to their roles and responsibilities, and especially given where we could find those roles in other communities. We're very fortunate. We have a very robust social services model in the Council on Aging that other communities don't have. But those positions were not being paid what other social workers were getting paid in other communities. So we were able to address that quickly. And that was the single biggest one, but there were absolutely others. There were other large scale positions that were not being paid at a commensurate level. And I don't know if you have any of the additional details there, just in terms of what positions in particular we found to be out of proportion to some of the others.
And this generated just basically like a one-time salary increase for people in those positions, like a large raise.
So it wasn't even a raise. It was a reclassification, right? So if we have in the technical and mid-management plan, it's called the T scale. And that scale where it pays that pay scale raises from, you could be at a T1 at the time all the way up to a T15. And T15, for example, the first assistant town council is a T15, for example. And the other lawyers, high level managers tend to be concentrated in the high end of the T scale.
Sure.
We expanded the T scale upward. There it now goes all the way up to T17. And we regraded those positions. We regraded positions accordingly. The highest movement was in the lower end of the scale. There was also a separate pot of money allocated to redesigning the building department. Around $300,000 was put into because the building department had seen so many retirements on at a relatively accelerated timeline. And because of how the building department, particularly in capital projects management, was working, we wanted to codify the capital projects division in particular as a separate body, a separate division that had its own division head and dealt with the large amount of capital work that we expect the building department to do. We are somewhat unique. We're not somewhat unique. We are unique in regard to other communities. Other communities tend to rely almost entirely on outside consultants as project managers. Brookline has a robust history of internal project managers, and the benefit of that, I think, is self-evident in the sense that almost none of our capital projects in the last 20 years have gone over budget. They've been delivered on time and in most cases under budget. The exception is the high school, and there's a whole host of reasons for why that's true. But by and large, Brookline, by keeping project management in-house, has reduced costs and improved delivery time. And so we wanted to ensure that level of service continued as our project managers retired. And we've been able to do that. So on the whole, we spent $400,000 on the technical and mid-management plan. We spent $100,000 improving the department head salary, and we spent $300,000 revamping the building department, which included regrading several different positions, increasing certain responsibilities, moving people who had historically been in clerical positions into positions that required more than just clerical work, and codifying the roles and responsibilities of positions for, people who had been there for 30 years, who had just over time taken on more responsibilities and never seen their job descriptions change.
So this particular topic, does it fit into the purview of our town subcommittee because of I'm trying to think as you're talking about exactly how this dovetails with our mission on this subcommittee. Is it because of potential staffing cuts?
Yes.
Okay.
So I had thought that I wanted to give you this history because it is important to especially given the issue, the potential topics for discussion that John Van Scoyac raised, which I think are great potential discussion topics, to give you a sense of how we have been able to determine that our pay and class are commensurate with other communities and with the roles and responsibilities of the people involved, and to get a sense of what would happen in the event of in the event that we had to make the cuts that we're now looking at in order to balance the budget in the absence of additional revenue. So I think, the big questions that John has raised are, has our overall headcount gone up too much? Do we have too many do we have too many people relevant to the have we added too many people? And is our pay is what we are paying appropriate for the roles and responsibilities that they have? And so I think in giving this history, I hope that what I'm trying to build out is that our pay scale, particularly not just for non-union staff, but also for union staff, which I want to talk about in a little bit, is commensurate with other communities. And then I want to give the opportunity to talk about overall headcount.
My recollection is this all started because department heads were talking about having difficulty hiring. So since we've implemented the new plan, is that less of an issue?
Yes, we have not encountered that difficulty. There are positions that are just inherently difficult to hire for.
Particularly in building, I know.
Yes, yes. And again, because it's unique, right?
Right.
We now have a director of capital projects, Lap Yan, who's been with us for some time. Lap is trying to hire a deputy now. And it's tough. It's, I do think we're going to be the beneficiary of the federal government, unfortunately. I think we will get project managers from, DOT, for example, applying for that position. But yeah, it's because there aren't a lot of communities that do what we do. And so when someone sees a project manager position in the public sector, either they, we can't compete with the private sector salaries on that front. And some people who are qualified for the job just don't even think to look for it. So we've been trying to really escalate our visibility and get out there and say, hey, this is a great role. It's family friendly. It's a huge amount of experience in complex capital projects. It's a great place to work. But by and large, that difficulty hiring has really eased up since we've been able to improve these positions.
Great.
On this topic, would it be okay if I just add a thought or two?
Yeah.
So, I appreciate, excuse me, all this information. At the same time, I keep thinking what really is the task in front of us on this committee isn't so much are the scales that we now have in place sufficient to attract, good people, but what drives the increase, the bump up, that is awarded, on a year-to-year basis, and the impact of that on our overall payroll costs. And that brings me back to one of these kind of conundrums of local governance, as I see it, in that you trust your managerial people to do the best possible job of negotiating contracts with your line employees. But at the same time, there's kind of a conflict of interest in that the greater the outcome of the negotiated contract for the line employees, that then becomes sort of the basis against which the managerial employees ask for their increase. So, it kind of comes down to have we put our negotiators in a position of, negotiating against their own best interests?
Yeah, but I thought, John, at least on the we were trying to bring ourselves into parity with other communities, not necessarily. We were essentially the takeaway I have from what Chaz talked about earlier is that we had some areas where we were grossly low on the pay scale.
Yeah, and I'm not disputing that. And in fact, I suspect as a member of the select board, without checking the record, I was with the rest of the select board in approving this new table. But my point is a different one, having to do with the real challenge comes in the annual incremental increases. And the annual incremental increases come down to the negotiated contracts with the line employees. And the negotiations are in the hands of the managerial employees who actually do better if there is, a generous increase. Generally speaking, they do better. And I don't say that any of them would, be lax in their negotiating for that reason, but it's just a conundrum, and it is an ongoing reality of how we deal with payroll increases, but the amount we pay, and how much that increases year to year under our contracts.
John, I think that we also, we outline that for the board when we have our forecast presentation, and we rely on the board to set the parameters for collective bargaining. So to the extent that you want a number that's less than what we have projected in the forecast, we can tell you what the impact of that is. So,
Yeah.
And we have put various scenarios that if you want it to be higher, it's this. If you want it to be lower, it's that. It is all, because we have the structural gap, it does all contribute to the overall deficit. But, 1 year we had a 0 during COVID. And that was not well received at all. But that was
Right.
what we went forward with, because we, talked to the board about what the impact of providing a COLA would be on the organization. So,
Yeah. Yep.
Any other discussion on this topic?
I just think it's helpful, because since a lot of the cost of the last override on the town side related to this, to be able to say, and it solved the problem, means we're not still fighting the same old battles, but we're still looking at issues.
Yeah, and I will say that, as you can see from the list of potential override asks, departments are not, by and large, with one exception, departments are not asking for further reclassifications, right? Departments are not out there saying we're not paying my employees enough. The exception there is DPW. But the big shift is that it's not about, we have 2 settled union contracts in public safety. It's the unsettled contract with AFSCME, where most of the AFSCME employees are in DPW. Most of the town side AFSCME employees are in DPW. That's where that remaining kind of outlier is. But you can see, the override, the last override was successful. It achieved its aims in this area.
How much of the potential new override then, Chaz, would be associated with this particular topic then?
So I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about that with this group. The big outlier right now is the Department of Public Works. The Department of Public Works conducted its own internal class and pay study over the course of last year. And, over the past, I would say, from the year and a half to a year ago, it conducted this pay and class study, analyzing where the deficiencies were in terms of comparable communities, and everything else that we did in other contexts with other pay scales. And the conclusions of this report, which we will circulate to you, and it's a public document, so we will post it with the materials here. We've just been collecting other materials as well to try and dump everything in the same, pay and class packet. Is twofold. One is, yes, there are positions that are out of line with other communities and just need to, be reassessed. But the other is that there are not meaningful opportunities for advancement in salary in certain groups, particularly among the groups that are classified in the laborer pay plan. In the school side, Jesse, they talk about steps and lanes, right?
Yes, yes.
In our universe, we have, steps. All of our almost all of our pay scales have steps of some kind. But the labor pay scale has no steps. And so your opportunity for salary increase is really only through the COLA, townwide cost of living adjustment that happens every year. And so there's no seniority, there's none of that. And they identified that as a critical deficiency. So the priority on our end is, as part of collective bargaining with AFSCME, implementing this pay and class study in a way that makes sense for the town's finances. So we need to figure out how to implement this over time in such a way that allows us to, for example, give steps to the laborers, reevaluate some of the other, there are positions that are union and non-union. There are pay scales for union and non-union employees that are doing similar work that need to come back into alignment. And all of that is going to have an impact on other departments as well. And so we need to be mindful of that. And so the overall cost of doing that is high, but we are working with the union and negotiating with the union to talk about how to implement this over time. And so when you look at the list of override priorities, you can see the DPW pay plan is in there. It's relatively low on the scale because there are other unmet needs in the Department of Public Works, like sustainability and tree preservation, that we've heard are priorities. And so we've placed those higher on the list. But
Yeah.
ultimately, we're going to need to figure out how to implement this pay plan. And if that's over the course of 6 years, okay, that's one thing. Like Melissa said, with the zero in during the COVID times,
Right.
that has a negative impact on our position with the union. But if we're able to do that faster and we're able to do that in an appropriate context, then that will allow us to settle a contract with AFSCME and be in a position where we have current settled contracts with all of our unions, which we haven't done in recent memory. So that's the one outlier in terms of where pay and class may not be where it needs to be.
Okay.
Um, sorry, Jesse, may I ask one more question?
Please.
So this is in the context of we might want to put this DPW proposal on the override ballot.
Potentially, yes.
Yeah. So what happens if the voters say no to it?
Then I think we have our answer, right? We have in all of these contexts, right? I think we have an answer, that we then bring back to the department and the community, which is there's not community will for us to be able to implement this. We will still do our best through cost of living adjustments and whatever we can to implement what we can. I do think it is critical for us to implement steps where there are no steps. But if we don't have the money for it, that's just going to take a longer time.
But what we wouldn't do, for example, would be to say, well, we have to, implement these increases somehow. So since the voters said no to the override question, we'll cut services to senior citizens, or we'll, cut
No.
library hours.
No.
No,
I think,
okay.
yeah.
I
I
mean,
think
I think that gets at one of the root, issues for how you frame a ballot question is, do we really mean it that we're putting this on the line? And I like that. I like your answer. And by the way, I also like that this is the kind of thing we would put on an override ballot, because the major problem that drives this continuing issue with being having budget gaps, it's always payroll. It's payroll, including, insurance costs, et cetera. And that's what should be on the ballot, is, some form of, if we're going to suddenly see a yet another need to increase, to sort of spike our overall payroll costs, because of a contract or because of an addition of personnel or because of something town meeting imposed on us. That is what should be on the ballot. That's all I'm saying.
Yes, and
I
so,
would, go ahead, Chaz.
no, go ahead, Jen, I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say, the issue in my mind has always been the community wants. So what we're told is they want their roads, they want their streets cleaned, they're concerned about all the things that these DPW workers do. And so they need to understand the trade-offs that they're making, and a trade-off for sustainability, which I know, climate change is real, but if we were pristine and there were no fossil fuels in Brookline, it wouldn't move the needle very much. And I think that what the town doesn't understand, and the school on their side the same way, is we can't have everything. So look at what your trade-offs and your priorities are. If someone said to me, would you pay the DPW workers versus, whatever some sustainability cost is, I know where I would vote, but we don't present it that way. And maybe that's something we need to think about.
Thank you,
And I
Jen.
think, yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
This is a little bit different topic because we got to move on as well. Well, first of all, just for a timing perspective, Chaz, we didn't. The same thing came up at some of our ERSC meetings in terms of we say when we're going to start, we don't put in the agenda when we're planning to finish. So, in terms of schedules for people, I want to respect that. Are we shooting for like a 10 a.m. finish to the meeting, so we'll pace ourselves, or are we planning to go longer?
It's probably worth trying to pace it for 10 o'clock.
Okay, good. So I will act accordingly.
Okay.
Second thing, I'm not trying to cut you off, but I'm saying this was a long discussion about pay class, and we have other things on the agenda in the next 20 minutes or so. The other
So
thing,
one thing, well, I'm sorry, go ahead.
the other thing I was going to say, and I'll share my screen just for a second. This should work, I think. Yeah. So I think you should be seeing my screen now. I think so. Which screen are you seeing? I don't know. You seeing the website, the town website?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, so this is what's on the town website for ERSC. And what I again see is something we asked about before is that general commit, when you talked about you're going to put it out in a place where we can see stuff with, post the documents. There's nothing on, and this is great that it has general committee work docs and town school financial model subcommittee. But since we established the future school and town side, and having 3 or 4 or 5 of these meetings per week, given all the groups, there's really nothing that's been posted here. And I would suggest that we maybe working with Nicole get those 3 items in here, with Sadas maybe original document that says this is our plan, with the minutes for those, and then 1 for each that has these documents that were posted, because people have told me, it's very hard to go find the agendas and then click and see if there's meeting packet material. Sometimes there is, sometimes there isn't. But the documents that eventually get shared should be, I think this is great that it's all on one page, and let it just continue as we're, in here, there's white space. I would suggest that we, continue or begin to catch up on the meetings that started for the 3 subcommittees and get them on this page so people in the town can, access it.
We can definitely do that. Thank you for that
So-
flag.
Yeah, that's all I wanted to share there. And okay, so I think in the interest of time, the next discussion was on fiscal policies in the context of
Sure.
revenue projections.
Before we depart from this
Yes.
one, though, I think
Okay, sure.
given the complexity of the we've had this good layout and this good discussion.
Yes.
Something the other subcommittees are doing is assigning members to follow up on this, in order to put together, if there's going to be a report on this. And I think given this fundamental question, which is our pay where it needs to be? Is our workforce at the level it needs to be? Does it need to be reduced? Does it need to be raised, et cetera? It might be helpful to assign a committee member to follow up on this. And then we can work with that committee member to get them any additional information they need. And, they can then be in charge of reporting back to the subcommittee about progress in terms of these questions around staffing and pay scale.
Yeah, okay, two comments. One is when, just as an update, maybe just to me, maybe I forgot, when is our subcommittee supposed to have its report ready? In the next 4 weeks, 8 weeks?
So the subcommittees are due to begin reporting back to the main committee in early December. So about 5 weeks.
Okay, early December. So that doesn't leave us a whole lot of time with town meeting and Thanksgiving and all kinds of things. Okay, thank you for that. And then the second thing was, is there someone from our subcommittee that wants to volunteer to take on this task of working with the town on developing the report component of our subcommittees or overall report on pay and workforce? If you're not ready to say yes now, I'll circle back with people.
It would be helpful to know what all the things are so that we know
Okay.
we're volunteering for the ones we're best at doing.
Yeah, that's fine. I guess I said this doesn't have to be done this minute. Okay. All right. So
Jesse, I have a question which relates to all of this, I think. And
yes.
it's a question on my mind is, look, I'm thinking of it as a voter now. Are we getting good value for our money, our real estate tax dollars that we are asked to give the town? And obviously, this is a comparables issue, but I've got no. I've been in the town long enough. On the inside of it, I've got no sense of whether we are good, bad, or indifferent in terms of other communities. I know this goes back to the comparable, I think, study that was done, but there seems to be no. I think it would be helpful if we had that. We really provide value. Maybe we can do it by example, because of, for example, it's complex. But picking up trash, for example, is a simple, discrete, important function that we do. Are we getting good value? Is Boston doing better than us? Is Lexington doing better? Where are we? And I think we should be able to demonstrate that as a background context, because it would, if we're providing good value, then the voters are going to be more sympathetic, I believe, to a request for investing more of their dollars.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, wonder if we can identify, as Chaz as I don't know, 15 or 20 key functions in town and rate them, as you're saying, against comparable communities in the eastern New England area.
We can take a little look at, in particular, I think the issue here is always about what other communities report out. What are the metrics they care about? And so we can take a look at that and try and figure out what those values are and whether we are able to make a comparison there.
I think it's important to keep in mind that what's most important to the voter is what they see. So you can tell me that the streets are great, and if my street isn't great, it's sure what will be the reaction. So just with a grain of salt, anything that we come out with.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful, Janet. If we could show, for example, we do 10 miles of street per year, whatever it is, per whatever the metric is, but it compares with other communities in this way that we really, although people are always going to complain about the roads because there's always going to be a pothole somewhere. Nonetheless, overall, from the point we present the other side, which is we're really doing a good job here. I don't see a metric, a graph, a comparison. I think it would be tremendously helpful to sell in terms of positioning the product being, I'm talking about here, the product being an override.
John, I'd be happy to talk to you offline. Maybe we could put a starter list together. I mean, the town can always say some of these are too difficult to figure out, but I'll circle back with you tomorrow or over the weekend. Maybe we can identify, a key 6 or 8 of those or 10 of those. That another one would be obviously education for the dollars that we spend as well.
Mm-hmm.
A large portion of the town's budget. We're rated high, but what we're spending is that over less, per pupil or per the result. We know people move here for the quality of the public education here. But are we getting the value for the dollar? So that's, I'll circle back. It's a good idea. Thank you for sharing that.
Okay.
Good. All right, Chess, you would circle back in there for pay class about the report. To get a person, we'll continue to work on that as we know what other kind of key reports we need.
Yep.
Happy to do it, Jesse. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. So we have about 15 minutes. Do you want to go to the number 4, discussion of fiscal policies? In the
Sure.
context-
Yeah,
Um,
this could be pretty quick, so
Okay.
that we can jump to the other stuff. So I just wanted to kind of highlight, what I'm anticipating in terms of a need for free cash in order to meet our fiscal policies. We've talked a lot about the revenue surpluses and why we have revenue surpluses. So I felt it was, a way to kind of showcase the reason why we intentionally have surpluses are to feed our fiscal policy. So I just have a quick graphic that kind of illustrates that. So for fiscal 27, the target for the reserve fund is almost $900,000. And that is our general operating reserve. A piece of that is funded with free cash. We need to maintain an undesignated fund balance in order to maintain our AAA rating. Right now, I'm estimating a $5 million need in that area. Last year we had $6 million that we were able to devote to that. We'll know that better once we kind of have our audit and our year-end information available, so that we can see where we are relative to the measures that Moody's uses in order to make sure that we are in a good fund balance position. Our liability fund requires $359,000. That potentially could go up because there are a couple of litigation issues that we're dealing with currently.
Right.
And then we have our capital improvement plan. So currently the requirement for capital improvement is in order to meet the policy target. We have operating revenue that is dedicated to our CIP, but then we have free cash that bolsters that number. So under the current policies, $5.1 million. If we are continuing on the reduction of operating revenue for CIP, that goes higher. So this category here, other potential draws on free cash, kind of acknowledge the other potential need if we change the operating budget target, and also if there's additional liability considerations. So potentially we would need about $15 million coming off of our fiscal 26 surplus in order to kind of maintain this kind of policy target with all of the the priorities that the town has. And this is without being able to apply any additional monies to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. That is obviously still a priority for the town as well. Just wanted to kind of show that in relation to the only area in revenue that we are able to kind of control in terms of the projections. Property tax is pretty standard. We raise the full levy every year. State aid kind of is out of our hands as well. And so kind of the local receipt experience. I don't know if my screen changed at all. If you can see the PowerPoint slide deck that I have up there.
No,
or is it...
it's still showing the Excel.
Great. So let me just reshare my screen.
Just a question about that one. The potential draws of almost $4 million. Is that just like one or two items, or is that a whole list of items that could be?
Two items, CIP and potential liability fund exposure that potentially could be a draw. So
you mean above the liability reserve fund?
Correct. So so basically the projection currently is based on what's currently hitting the liability fund. And so if we have additional settlements in the fund, that requires additional free cash to bring the target back up again.
Got it. Thank you. Okay. So
yep.
Yeah, your PowerPoint didn't show up yet.
Sure. So then I just wanted to kind of, so somewhere around $11 to $15 million needs in free cash, and then just show that against. This is a slide from a previous presentation that we had done. So you can see that, we generated in fiscal 25, $11.8 million in local receipts. So almost all of that is needed just to meet the policy requirements. And so when we're talking about generating free cash, it really, the only other place that we could, get potential surpluses from departmental turnbacks. And as these budgets get tighter and tighter, that is not a reliable source for us. So, just showing that, the surpluses are intentional, but they're absolutely needed in order to meet all of the policy requirements.
Okay, yeah, Melissa, thank you just personally for explaining what was my number 4. I didn't really understand where that topic was going to go when I looked at the agenda, and I couldn't find any items in the meeting packet. So it's for me to understand what's going on here, and maybe everyone else figured it out, but I only got it in the middle of while you were talking. This is a discussion of how existing town fiscal policy requirements affect our budget?
And basically
Okay.
explains the reason why we intentionally build surpluses into our local receipt projections.
Yeah.
Oh, got it. Thank you. Yeah, that makes sense now. Okay.
Melissa, will both of those things that you showed please be
Yes, I'll be
included?
sending them to Nicole. The PowerPoint presentation's already up there,
That
but
was
I'll just
good.
I'll isolate the slides so that you've got the two of them
That
together.
would be great, so we know what we're looking for.
Yeah, hopefully that'll show up in that same place I showed earlier, because when you say it's up there, what you mean is it's in a packet from a certain, meeting.
Yeah,
And there's no way to really find it because you don't know where to start. So if we can get all those meeting agenda packet minutes and attachments in that one list, that'll be much, much easier for us to
Be
focus.
very
Yeah,
helpful.
I agree. Jesse,
Yeah.
may I just quickly make a comment?
Yes, please.
I'm gonna, with all due deference to our administration people who are here and who are horrified when I say this, but I'm going to continue to ask the question of whether we are absolutely bound to the commitment we have made to the pay down of the unfunded pension liability. And the reason I'm going to ask that question is because other communities are looking at it. And maybe they also are experiencing the same warning that this is going to potentially impact our bond rating. But I haven't yet seen, hard evidence that there is no opening for any community ever to retreat an inch from their commitment to funding their unfunded pension liability without there being damage to their bond rating. Newton has looked at this and is looking at it again. Other communities are looking at it. Some of them are AAA rated communities like Brookline. And if it comes down to if we stretched from 2030 to 2031, our commitment to completely funding our unfunded pension liability, that would be the same savings as we would be asking for in an override question. I think we need to know, we need information of that nature. What are we asking the public to do in terms of an override? And could we achieve the same thing with a 1-year stretch or 2 or a 3-year stretch of our commitment to the unfunded pension liability? That's all I'm going to say.
Anyone have a response to that?
No,
Or-
just clarification, there is a state law deadline. I know we're ahead of that, but what does the law require?
2040.
Thank you.
2040
Yeah.
is what the state law requires. I mean, Melissa can add into this too. So there are a couple things. You're right, John. And actually, one of the things that Newton did last year or the year before that it set my teeth on edge was they effectively mortgaged the future, right? Or they mortgaged the future. Really, is what it is. How I would describe it. They said, and you may recall, Newton had a failed operating override. And so they said, well, we know that our pension is going to be paid off by 2030. We know that we're going to do this. And so, therefore, we can count on the fact that there's going to be more money available in the future. And so we can start to use some of our free cash as though it were operating money. Because we know eventually we will pay down our pension. And therefore, we can use this to basically bridge ourselves from here to 2030. Or whenever their pension deadline is. I don't know if theirs is 2030 or not.
No, I think it's after that. Yeah.
Yeah. So they basically, are doing some, financial footwork in order to use free cash, which should be for one-time expenses, for operating expenses, under the premise that eventually there will be money in the operating budget for this. And I think the fear that I have for that is one, and the reason why I think Melissa presented this is one, I don't think we have the free cash for that. I don't think it would be wise for us to try and leverage free cash that way. And two, even when you look at our pension liability as, all right, we could spread that out a bit. We still have a tremendous OPEB, other, liability behind that. And we still have all of these things that will need to be paid for beyond our pension, beyond there. And while there is no deadline for paying down our OPEB liability, we're at less than 35% funded on that front. It's going to take us a long time to do that, even if we are contributing at a level similar to how we are contributing into the pension now. And while we are doing that, while we are paying down an outstanding liability that we have, we're floating that cost in other ways. There are costs that we have to pay, that we are then paying and borrowing out and, effectively putting us at a disadvantage. And so when I think of, do we want to change and one last thing here is that the pension payoff schedule actually starts to go down over time. We are now in the real crunch period of this, in which we cannot, our assumption is that our pension investment is going to grow by, I don't know, Lincoln, what is it, 6.8%? What's our
Correct,
current?
6.8%. Yes.
Which is optimistic, but it's less optimistic than it used to be, which is good. And as a result of that, beginning in 28, 29, fiscal years 29, fiscal year 30, you see a decrease in the amount of money that we put towards the pension obligation. So it's not as though there's a constant straight line and then all of a sudden it dips and the tens of millions of dollars we pay towards our pension obligations disappear. It does slowly decline, and it is something that we take into account when we think about how we are budgeting in the far future. But for now, if we were to change that, if we were to refine that gradient somehow and say our target is 2031, 2032, the benefit that we would see is fairly minimal, and the potential for danger in terms of our bond rating is fairly high. So it's a risk reward thing that, the benefit that we see from getting a little bit of relief in the short term by moving our pension schedule out is compromised by the fact that the bond ratings agencies look at that and say, that's you've opened the door. And now it will be very easy the next time a fiscal crisis happens to move it to 20 to 33 to 34. You're no longer you're no longer standing firm in terms of dealing with this unfunded liability, or underfunded liability. So all of those things contribute to our sense of why we don't think it's a good idea to deviate from the 2030 target. But that said, it's absolutely a policy decision that could be made. The select board can make that policy decision. Town meeting can endorse it. It is something that can be done. Melissa is shaking her head. I'm sorry. It's because it's the pension.
It's a decision not under, the retirement board has the authority to change the schedule. So it is not something that the select board can singularly decide that they want to do. And I would just say that the appropriation is not allowed to decrease. So really what you're talking about is, next year, the increase is a $3 million increase. And so, that's not going to solve the overall problem that we have. And I think also the larger issue is group health. That's growing by over $5 million. So if there's any place to move the needle, I think group health is probably the better area to focus on.
Yeah, and I appreciate those answers. I would just encourage the other committee members to dig into this question and the options that other communities are taking under these circumstances. There was a reason why Massachusetts at the state level loosened the requirement. It's because municipality after municipality was finding they just couldn't meet the 2030 deadline without too much pain. So, it's 2040 now for a reason.
One other thing here is that we are also bound by the county. Unfortunately, we have obligations to the county, and the county can increase pressure on us in ways that we can't control. And so that's something that needs to be taken into consideration on this too. And so I think it would be great if a committee member wants to take, we're talking about maybe next week, what we talk about in terms of dividing up the labor is to put that list of questions to be answered together.
Yep.
And I think this can absolutely be one of them, because I do think it's worth interrogating. People, to your point, John, people have a right to the answer to the question. And people.
Bring a question for a second, so we'll get it on the recording.
The question is, you know, are there other ways by changing the town's fiscal policies to meaningfully increase revenue? For example, changing the pension schedule, changing the pension reimbursement schedule.
Or decrease expenses, actually, right? I mean,
Fair, yes, yeah.
Yeah.
But to Melissa's point, the real target there is group health. And so I do think that bears discussion.
Yeah.
All right, I think we're sort of hitting the 10 o'clock barrier here, Chaz. Although the discussions have been good. Shall we move the number 5 to the beginning of next week?
That sounds good. And on our end, I will try and block out some more time. If folks
Yeah,
want to go.
no problem. It just, I think given the extensive amount of material you're bringing, we need to find a way to summarize it quicker. If we're gonna put so many things on the agenda, I will say before we close here that I read every one of those 4 because they were posted in time. And I just want to say to Charlie, like, bravo. I mean, these are great reports. They are detailed, they are clear, they have the visuals to back them up. It makes so much sense, you know, again, they're just like, you know, Jesse Q Citizen, reading this stuff, it's so clear, like, you know, so good job. I mean, this is, you know, puts into perspective what's really happening. It gives the detail, it has the data. So, you know, it'd be great to have time to go over this, but this is like a 30-minute or more, 45-minute presentation to go over these 4 documents. There's so much in there. So, you know, I look forward to having him, you know, give us a walkthrough next week. And again, we need to time it out, Chaz, so that we're not, you know, if there are other things we want to do, we're just overloading ourselves, you know, in a 60-minute discussion. So
Right.
Understood. Thank you.
yeah, okay. So thanks. I think we've got we're sort of at the top of the hour, and I do respect everyone's time. There's lots going on. So thank you. Are there any other further comments anyone wanted to bring up before we adjourn? Okay, so so John and I will meet on in terms of action items that came up during this meeting, beginning to think about what those big questions are, and then who will be assigned to work on writing those parts of the report. And then John and I will meet offline about the sort of value for the dollar topics. So, and we realize giving them to you is like making more work, but hopefully you'll look through it and make informed decisions about these we can do and these are not, so we can't. So that'll be all right. The more we can get data to, of course, I think John's point's well taken that the citizenry will react hopefully positively to a presentation to them that indicates how we stand in terms of providing the kind of value they've come to rely upon for the dollars. And then when they see where their financial pressures are, it helps them see why we need to raise more money. And with that, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Anyone against? If
Second.
not, okay, John, let's see, John Doggett,
Aye.
Ruth Ellen,
Yes.
and I think I got everybody, and I do too. Thank you, everyone. Thank Nicole for setting up the meeting, and for Ann, Lincoln, Chaz, and Melissa for your work, and Charlie, who I think dropped off. Thank him again. We'll see you guys next Thursday at 9.
Right. See you
Great.
then.
Thank you all.
very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Enjoy.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.